How's it going, everyone? It is Andre Williams, and over here we talk stocks and we focus on one thing. Always protect your profits. And today we're going to be talking about Tesla, Rivian, NIO, and as well as for ChargePoint. I want to make sure you guys are prepared going into Monday. What we're going to talk about are the key levels as far as support and as well as resistance. Because if they have pullbacks or if you're looking for a move to the upside, you could find opportunities to trade off of. And also we're going to be taking a look at the short interest information for all of them, and as well as taking a look at the institutional ownership. And if you're new to this channel, I just want to let you know we have timestamps down below inside the description. I won't waste any more time. Let's get into those videos. So we're going to take a look at the chart for Tesla. Let's see how it performed on the day. So it ended up closing at $720.20, being up 0.74%. On the low, it tested $710.67, and then on the high, testing $730.87. When we take a look at the volume stats on the day, you can see we traded at 22.993 million shares, and the average volume over 10 trading days is at 28.046 million shares. So we did have below average volume on the day, and we saw a little bit of strength in the stock. Now when we take a look at our chart, which is the hourly chart, I want you guys to pay attention to some key levels going into next week. So we know for a fact that Tesla saw resistance at 730.87. So if we end up having price action and a break above this level, especially if we see strength in the markets, the next area you want to see Tesla get to is around 763 before it starts seeing some resistance, and then of course seeing what it could do from there. Strong possibility it can make that move going to 777, so you want to make sure you keep that on watch. As far as if it decides to pull back now, the area that you want to watch is right at 700. I know it did test a low at $710.67, but $700 a lot of traders are watching, especially on a pullback, and seeing if it would move back up. And for the next level to the downside, if the market decides to pull back, I would be watching right here around $680. One thing that was clear, we see that there's demand in this area. We saw it on the 13th. We also saw it back here as well as on the 6th. So keep a very close eye. I know there's a lot of levels here, but at least you know what it looks like. If the market is weak, you know how to play the puts, or whether you want to take a short position. And if the market is strong, at least you know as far as where you can start taking profits on your calls, or whether you're going to just be buying stock. So we're going to take a look at the recent short interest information for Tesla. So the off-exchange short volume ratio is at 50.41%, and the off-exchange short volume is just over 6.99 million shares. Scrolling down on the page, the short shares availability is at 10 million, updated 29 minutes ago, and then for the short buffer rate, it is at 0.30%. When we take a look at the history of the short volume, we can see for the close of the 13th, it was at 47.20, and then for the close of the 14th being at 50.41. So it did go up a bit, and then when we take a look at the short interest percentage of the float, it is at 3.16%. So what does this tell us? Tesla doesn't have short squeeze potential. So we're going to take a look at the chart for Rivian. Let's see how it performed on the day. So it ended up closing at $31.60, being up 2.50%. On the low, it tested $29.91, and then on the high, testing $31.63. So when we take a look at the volume stats on the day, you can see we traded at 13.685 million shares, and the average volume over 10 trading days is at 17.06 million shares. So we did have below average volume on the day, but we saw some strength in the stock. Now when we take a look at our chart, which is the hourly chart, let's pay attention to some key levels going into next week. So one thing that was clear, we saw that as far as support is concerned, Rivian seems to hold very well around 29.70. So the range that you want to know about as far as demand, will it hold between 29.70 and as well right here between 29.14? That's where we've seen buyers stepping in and bringing up this stock further. Now as far as for the high that we saw today at 31.63, if we decide to be bullish going into next week, so if the market continues to move up, don't be surprised if we see Rivian testing 32.72. It saw resistance back here on July the 11th, and we could also see it happening on July the 8th as well. And if it could break through this level, that's where it can get interesting, and Rivian should be able to make that move going to $33 and possibly $34. So keep that on watch. Now, if the market decides to have a pullback, then we want to see $29.70 and as well as that $29 area actually hold. If it breaks through it, it does have a gap that needs to be filled at $26.94 ever since it had that run up. So that is one thing that we know for a fact. If you're looking to play some puts while the market is falling, keep an eye on Rivian. Big opportunity down here if the market decides to reverse. But for the most part, if we continue to be on an uptrend, I can see it making a further move to the upside. So we're going to take a look at the recent institutional ownership and short interest information for Rivian. So we see the green rows indicate new positions while red rows indicate closed positions. So when we take a look at the recent filings, we see for the 15th, we have a closed position from HB Wealth Management LLC. And then we have for the 14th, Cardasco Financial Network that purchased 3,250 shares. XR Securities LLC that went in with calls with a value of shares of 12,500. We have Cedar Mountain Advisors LLC that purchased 200 shares. Arcadios, you can see that they close out the position. And we have Global Retirement Partners LLC that purchased 1,941 shares. So again, we see institutions are loading up. And then when we take a look at the short interest, the off-exchange short volume ratio is at 44.72%. And then for the off-exchange short volume, it is just over 1.9 million shares. Scrolling down on the page, the short shares availability is at 4.8 million, updated just now. And for the short borrow fee rate, it is at 0.67%. When we take a look at the history of the short volume, we can see for the close of the 13th, it's at 41.31. And then for the close of the 14th, being at 44.72. So it has gone up. And then when we take a look at the short interest percentage of the float being at 11.30%, looks like Rivian does have some short squeeze potential. So we're going to take a look at the chart for NIO. Let's see how it performed on the day. So it ended up closing at $20.72, being down 1.57%. On the low, it tested $19.93, and then on the high, testing $20.90. When we take a look at the volume stats on the day, you can see we traded at 40.97 million shares, and the average volume over 10 trading days is at 52.046 million shares. So we did have below average volume on the day, and we had a slight pullback in the stock. Now when we take a look at our chart, which is an hourly chart, let's pay attention to some key levels here. So NIO ended up holding up $19.93, so we know as far as $20, support is fairly strong. So going into Monday, if it decides to revisit this particular level, do know that NIO has a gap that needs to be filled at $19.23. Add that to your notes. It's very possible for it to fill in that gap. If it decides to trend up and we have a move in the upward direction, we know the high of the day was at $20.90. So if we can get a break above $20.90, then the next level you want to see NIO being able to break through is at $21.46 or 21.5. If it can break above 21.5, that's where I want to see the move going to $22 and then $22.33, and then seeing if it can make that move to $23.12. Of course, this would take some time, and we also have to take into consideration the economic conditions going down in China. That's part of the reasons why NIO pulled back the way that it did. We'll talk about that further in the final recap, but that's what I'm seeing so far in regards to the upside for NIO and as well as for the downside. So overall, let's see if NIO can continue to hold up around this $20 area of support. So we're going to take a look at the recent institutional ownership and short interest information for NIO. So scrolling down on the page, green rows indicate new positions while red rows indicate closed positions. So when we take a look at the recent filing, we have a closed position for the 15th here from Herald Advisors Inc. We also see for the 14th, we have XR Securities LLC that closed their position as well. We also have Global Retirement Partners LLC that purchased 2,180 shares, and we have PDS Planning Inc. that purchased 54,147 shares. A closed position from Silicon Valley Capital Partners, and we also see SOA Wealth Advisors LLC that purchased 78 shares. And we can't forget, we have Diversified Trust Company that purchased 35,367 shares. Now, when we take a look at the short interest, the off-exchange short volume ratio is at 58.73%, and then for the off-exchange short volume, it is just over 11.7 million shares. Scrolling down on the page, the short shares availability is at 10 million, updated 4 minutes ago, and then for the short borrow fee rate, it is at 0.33%. When we take a look at the history of the short volume, we can see for the close of the 13th, it is at 58.02. 52. And then for the close of the 14th being at 58.73. So this went up a little bit. And then when we take a look at the short interest percentage of the float being at 5.19%, NIO doesn't have short squeeze potential. So we're going to take a look at the chart for ChargePoint. Let's see how it performed on the day. So it ended up closing at $11.57, being up 2.03%. On the low, it tested $10.97, and then on the high, testing $11.59. When we take a look at the volume stats on the day, you can see we traded at 8.396 million shares, and the average volume over 10 trading days is at 10.04 million shares. So we did have below average volume on the day, but we still saw some strength in the stock. Now, when we take a look at our chart, which is the hourly chart, you can see the levels that we made since the previous video. And I was saying it was very important for ChargePoint to hold $12. Essentially, it broke right through it. And the next level we were looking for to go to the downside was around $10.31. But we had support kicking in right here at $10.97. So if we see weakness in ChargePoint, especially going into next week, it will get down to $10.30. So that's something you want to keep a very close eye on. If it is able to reclaim back above 12, of course you want to see it building support. You want to see some consolidation. It did see a high of the day at 11.59, so making a move to 12 would not be out of the question. But we could start seeing some resistance if we try to make that move to 13.25. You can see at 13.25, since we had that big time sell-off, if we could hold above $12, that's why I'm saying it's very easy for ChargePoint to get back to 13.25. But of course, I could see some resistance right here at the 200 EMA, which is at $12.60. So again, be very patient when it comes to this play, especially if you're going to be playing options on it, okay? But I could definitely see if the market is strong going into next week, ChargePoint should be able to reach back into that $13 range. So now you know what it looks like to the upside and as well as for the downside. So we're going to take a look at the recent institutional ownership and short interest information for ChargePoint. Scrolling down on the page, green rows indicate new positions, while red rows indicate closed positions. So when we take a look at the recent filings we have here for the 15th, we have Newbridge Financial Services Group Inc. that purchased 345 shares, and we have Global Retirement Partners LLC that purchased 608 shares, and this is for the 14th. Have a closed position from XR Securities LLC as well. Now, when we take a look at the short interest, the off-exchange short volume ratio is at 66.46%, and then for the off-exchange short volume, it is just over 2.17 million shares. Scrolling down on the page, the short shares availability is at 1.1 million, updated 1 minute ago, and then for the short borrow fee rate, it is at 4.49%. When we take a look at the history of the short volume, we can see for the close of the 13th, it was at 62.92, and then for the close of the 14th, being at 66.46. So it has gone up, and then when we take a look at the short interest percentage of the float, being at 17.47%, ChargePoint does have short squeeze potential. So to give you guys my final thoughts on each of these stocks, for Tesla, it is still on an uptrend. We see that the market has been moving up, so of course it's following along with it. And if it decides to continue on its bullish trend, we want to see if it can get to at least $760 for the coming week. This is very doable if we continue to see strength in tech, so you want to keep an eye on that. But if it does decide to pull back or we have a strong sell-off, you know those levels to the downside, so look out for those opportunities, do your homework, and put your notes together. And for Rivian, as far as the chart is concerned, you want to keep an eye on these following levels. $29. If it breaks through $29, do know that it has a gap that needs to be filled around $26.94. And as far as for the move to the upside you want to look for would be around $32 to $33 for the coming week. But just like the rest of the market, it is continuing to show some solid strength in an uptrend, and that's why I want to make sure you guys are fully aware of where it can go to next week if the market continues to be strong. And as far as for NIO, there's a few things we need to take into consideration. Let's first start with the positive. So they are going to be expanding into the German market. That is great. Number two, we know that China is actually going through and reinstating lockdowns. So of course that's going to have an impact on Chinese stocks. And then secondly, they are seeing a slowdown in their GDP growth. And we know that NIO does rely fairly heavily on China in regards to their overall sales. So that's why you're seeing right now that NIO has been on a downtrend and it is losing some steam. But does that mean that it's going to continue to tank? Not necessarily. That's that's why I gave you guys those key levels on the chart, and you want to be watching them closely going into next week. And of course, you'll have an opportunity to play it to the downside or play it to the upside. So keep those key levels a part of your homework. And then as far as for ChargePoint, if you guys remember what I said in my previous video when we were analyzing the chart, if it breaks below $12, you will see a lot of weakness. And that's exactly what has happened. If it decides to pull back further going into next week, the level that you want to see hold is around $10.30. If it does not hold, then of course that's why it can go down further. But if it decides to start catching back up with the market and want it to go on an uptrend, you want to see it get to around $13. If it can get to $13, that's where things can get very interesting for the stock. We already know how well it can move. So pay attention to that going into next week. The reason why I share these levels with you guys, I want to make sure that you have a strategy. You have the weekend to sit down, take a look at the chart, take a look at the option contracts or whatever game plan you may have in regards to your entry and as well as your exit, so you can come up with a trading plan. Never ever push the buy button or take a trade if you do not have a plan. This is one of the worst things that you can do. Inside of the Discord, we have a 10% rule. The moment that your option contract moves up 10%, move your stops and protect your profits. So just in case there's some volatility and the contract pulls back on you, then of course you're able to protect those profits and you don't have to be riding the elevator. And that's why when it comes to these particular plays that I talked about, and we know that the EV sector is extremely volatile, you could be a step ahead in the market because you know exactly what you need to do before placing your first trade. But we also can't forget there is going to be a Fed meeting near the end of the month. We also have some big tech companies that are going to be coming up with earnings around that time as well. A good example of that is Apple. So again, the tech sector is definitely going to be the sector to watch. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and let's see how these stocks perform going into next week. We'll talk soon.